Hello and welcome to The Punter, the show dedicated to the wonderful, exciting world of sports betting. I'm Russ Wiseman from sportingbet, and joining me today, I've got a fantastic panel to look ahead at the weekend sporting action. We've got football authority Alan Alger from Bluesquare. Al, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, Russ. Very well, very well.
Good to see you. And a new face to the Punter, David Garbacz, a well-renowned odds companion today, David, and an authority on sports betting, and a pretty much a consultant these days to the punting world.
It's an honour and a pleasure to be here, Russ. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, well, I used to sort of do a lot of odds compiling, but not really done much of that for the last couple of years, concentrating more on, but still very much got my eye on the ball. Don't worry about that.
I can assure you both of these guys know pretty much everything there is to know about sports betting. But boys, before we get into the action this weekend, let's just look back ahead of what happened this week. You're both Gooners, you're both Arsenal fans. Point lost, Al, a point gain, 2 points lost. What do you think? 2-0 down against Liverpool at one stage. I mean, for me, I thought you'd probably win that game.
Yeah, but you looked at the prices before the game, and Liverpool drifted to a pre-game price of 11-4. And, you know, I think people who watch this show know I'm one of the most critical people of my own team. And I looked at that price of 11-4 and thought that Liverpool were a bet. Then I saw Carragher in the defence and I thought, well, up against Walcott, he's going to have a bit of trouble. I was in two minds, and in the end, I thought the best play was over goals, and obviously that ended up copping. But from an Arsenal point of view as a fan, when you're 2-0 down against Liverpool and you take a point, you're quite happy. But if you display, if in that particular display from the whole of the first half, you would say that you'd be unhappy as a fan looking ahead to bigger games that we've got coming up this season.
And Dave, is that the way you saw it? I mean, I'd have thought you'd have fancied the games beforehand, certainly the way I saw it. But like Al said, goals probably were on the agenda in that game.
They were. Like Alan, as you can see from Alan, I've got a few more grey hairs than him. I am a big Gooner, again, like Alan. But, and I've been going to watch this team for many, many, many years, probably now on 30, 35 years. And I've got to say that there has, in my lifetime, I've never seen a defence as bad as the one that's currently on display at the moment. So you talk about Wednesday's game. Of course, there's a little bit of satisfaction from the fact that we came back from 2-0 down to draw 2-2. But against Carragher and Wisdom in the centre of defence, against a pretty slowish Liverpool midfield, apart from Luis Suarez and Gerrard, they're not the Liverpool team of old. It's disappointing. You know, you want to go to Arsenal versus Liverpool at home, and you shouldn't be 2-0 down in the first place. It's got to be 3 points on the board. It has to be. So I came out of that game disappointed. You know, we got back nicely, but
well, let's have a look at where that leaves you in the table, boys. I mean, Arsenal, they're sitting in 6th place. I mean, 4th place is still a very real possibility. But the way that pans out at the moment, obviously, it looks like a straight fight at the top there, doesn't it? But I mean, is it there for United at the moment? I would have thought so.
Well, the price for United to win the title obviously shortened in midweek, and you know they're heavily odds on now. They were heavily odds on at a couple of stages last season with less games to play. So, you know, you look at the prices there. Really, realistically, with the amount of games left, if you did fancy City, there's nothing putting you off actually placing that bet because of this. There's so long left in the season, and the fact that they did it with much shorter space of time after losing at Arsenal last year, when some bookmakers paid out on Manchester United as the winners.
Before we have a look at the top 4 betting, Dave, any thoughts on a quick value in this one?
What I would say just very briefly is it's so disappointing that at the beginning of February it is just a total 2-horse race. I mean, you'd have thought in all previous years at least you've had a Chelsea challenging as well, or even an Arsenal or a Liverpool, even if they were at 20-1 or 25-1, they had some sort of a sneak. But you can see there, bar the front 2, they're 40-1 Chelsea, and it's just the real fun of the title race has gone out of it at such an early stage of the season.
Let's take a look at the top 4 bets at the moment, because that actually is a bit more interesting, isn't it? Because we've got genuine contenders there, even Liverpool now, who are starting to show some signs of getting back into this. I think your mob there, Bluesquare, Al, in fairness, seem to fancy Liverpool a little bit more than my firm. But I mean, you've got to suggest here, though, that the Arsenal and Spurs, you're going to be going head to head here, aren't you? Surely at some point.
I mean, we haven't got much percentage in Chelsea there. I suppose that's why we're shorter prices than the other 3. But
and some of the big hitters, in fairness, could play Chelsea at 7-on with you.
They could do, but would you trust them? I think the overriding feeling with Arsenal, and going back to Arsenal again, is that some people will credit Arsene Wenger with the fact that he's got us into the top 4 for however many seasons going back and consistently achieved that. Now, has he done that because Arsenal were good? I think that's slowly the tide's slowly turning to the fact that the Premier League isn't very good, and it's not that hard to be the 4th best team in this division. And being the 4th best team in the division will get you those points, and will make Arsenal a bet at the 5-4 on offer with Sportingbet at the moment, because I just don't think you see the top 2 places are done and dusted. You've got any 2 of those 5 going into the top 4, and I really do think that you would like to take Arsenal odds against to overhaul Tottenham.
Dave, before we get your views on this, we'll just have another peek at the top of the table there. Obviously, Everton, Liverpool, similar prices there, around about the 6-1, 4-1 mark, the pair of them. I mean, is there a team that you're looking at there, maybe that can make a charge there and slip their way into one of these top 4 spots?
Yeah, for sure. For me, the standout bet in the top 4 betting has got to be Everton. I mean, they are playing much better football than either Spurs or Arsenal. If you sort of think that 1-10 Chelsea, they're probably going to sneak in, even with the Benitez factor and the fact that they're not as great as in previous seasons, but they should still definitely make at least the top 4. But regarding the other place, the one that's really more or less between Spurs, Arsenal and Everton, I think that Everton are standout. I'd much rather be on them at 4-1 than Arsenal at 5-4, or what, Tottenham at 11-10. It's a no-brainer, really.
Yeah. And you've got to remember as well about Everton, traditionally they do finish very well indeed. Let's have a look at top goal scorer betting here. Now, I mean, always an interesting market, this one, Al, isn't it? Because the favourites this year really at the top of the market were the likes of Rooney, even Torres was up there to start with. Van Persie was clearly well backed, and Suarez in fairness. And we're pretty much now down to, well, it is a 2 or 3 run race. You'd be really stretching the imagination now, I think, to really give Demba Ba a massive chance of getting into that, because I do think these 2 guys, if they do stay fit. But how do you see this at the moment? Because Luis Suarez has been fantastic this year, hasn't he? And he is a goal scorer.
He's been great, although, what did we see at Arsenal the other day? He's in a much more withdrawn role. So I think that could be a big factor. The fact that Liverpool were playing him, over on that left-hand side and letting Sturridge go through the middle. So you have to take that into account. But anybody that backed Suarez at the start of the season would have backed him with one thing in mind, and that's that Liverpool cannot afford to leave him out week in, week out. Whereas if you were going to back Van Persie or Rooney, it was going to be a situation of either or in some of the games. Van Persie's been so good for United that they can't afford to leave him out at the moment, and I think that they're enjoying having that one, pivotal player in their attack. But the big thing about Van Persie is injuries, and we said it all last season. This guy's worth taking on because you feel that he's just one step away from a bad injury. Hasn't happened. He's been about 18 months now without anything significant happening to him, and maybe he's just got that strength now from being a bit older and wiser. So. I mean, if you were to offer me a free bet there, I'd probably take the Suarez 11-4, just on the basis that anything can happen and there's only a goal between them. But I don't see anyone else getting in there, and Michu has been that standout every season. One of the top 4 will be someone you just cannot think of, and he's been the one this season. I mean,
Dave, obviously if RVP was playing at Arsenal now, you've already mentioned to me off air that you think that Arsenal probably would be challenging, even that you think he's that good a player. I mean, Alan makes a great point now about the injuries. I mean, around about 8 to 11, 4 to 6, is he a play still to win this thing? He's clearly the best player this season.
At Arsenal, for 8 of the 10 seasons that he was with us, all he had to do was go and play some nonsense friendly for Holland in sort of November or December time, when he then would do his ligaments for 10 months. But now that he's at Man United, of course, he's fully fit. Saying that, I actually don't completely agree with you, Alan, that he's a certainty to start every game, and it's for that reason that I think he's more of a lay than necessarily the injury factor, where it's sort of proved over the last 18 months that he actually has probably overcome his injury problems. Look at United, Rooney now in big goal-scoring form, Hernandez, who's just, I don't know what, he scored 10 out of 10 in his last 12 games or something like that. Danny Welbeck as well, 4 fantastic strikers. Whereas Liverpool, you can be absolutely rest assured that Luis Suarez will be playing every single minute of every single game. Yeah. Once United start getting back into the Champions League and that starts rocking and rolling again, it's going to be really big games for them. And I can
the treble's still on for them, and you are probably right in the sense that towards the end of the season, being 6 on for the title now, they could be sort of 20 on in 3 weeks' time, and he might not be needed for some of those games.
That's right.
I do take that point.
If they're home to Norwich on a Saturday, having to play Real Madrid on the Tuesday, he's going to play.
I agree with you.
Two other strikers.
That's a very good point.
I think it's very good point. Still probably a 2-run race.
Yeah.
Probably still the most fascinating market, though, is at the bottom of the table. Let's quick look at the league table here now.
Especially after yesterday.
I mean, obviously, QPR, they've had 2 waves of buying now, so at some stage they'd like to see some points. They are slightly adrift there. But we'll take a lock at the betting in a moment. But, I mean, it's starting to be congested, isn't it, though? Because there's certain teams there, even the likes of Norwich, you could quite comfortably be getting dragged back into this. Alan, quick views on this one. I mean, I've been against QPR pretty much all the way since I backed them on day 1 of the season, lost 5-0 against Swansea. But I've got some tips in there that the likes of Swansea, who are nowhere to be seen, Norwich, who were one of my original tips as well. I'm not giving up on them. Can we see an outsider maybe breaking into this bottom 3 at all?
Well, they're not on the graphic, but West Ham are 10 to 1 at the moment.
Great point.
West Ham are 10 to 1, and their defence just doesn't look. It doesn't look like an Allardyce defence. Yeah. They may have rested players at Arsenal when they were beaten out of sight, but that was just a sort of 10-minute period at the start of the second half. But I would say if you were going to have any kind of bet in this relegation market, it's definitely off the graphic at the moment, and it's West Ham at 10 to 1 because I can see so many of those sides improving past them. You need a hell of a lot of luck in this bet because you're relying on other teams not to be bad as well. You know, if 3 of these teams capitulate, then West Ham can be as bad as you like in the next few months, but they're not going to catch them up.
Dave, that's a fascinating view from Alan. Is there something similar to you? I mean, I don't rate West Ham either, and the fact they're not on the graphic is difficult.
West Ham, I'm a big bearer of, to be perfectly honest. I mean, the very fact that they took Marin Shamak on loan proves
1 win in 9, yeah, it's 1 win in 9 as well, as you said, so it's not exactly looking good for them at the moment.
No, it really isn't. I would really agree with that. I think 10 to 1 West Ham's a big price for someone. You always do get last 2-3 months of the season, every single year, someone who from nowhere suddenly find themselves dropping points after point after point. Are QPR going to rally? They probably are. Reading seems to be picking up points.
Newcastle certainly will with their signings. They'll win their home games, which
Newcastle
they've not been doing.
Fine, yeah. The 2 for me who could potentially drop into that zone are West Ham, as we've spoken about, and Norwich, who, despite all the really good work that Chris Hughton's done, they don't really scream out massive safety potential to be fair.
Well, some fascinating views there from the boys on the season so far. Join us after the break, where we're going to get some points and pointers for the weekend action. Come back after this break. Welcome back to part 2 of the Punter. Now we're going to take a look ahead at the weekend action. The boys are in fine form, I'm sure you agree. And we'll start off here, guys, with obviously a fascinating game, this one. See by the graphic there, Queen's Park Rangers hosting Norwich City. I mean, so much going on with QPR at the moment. I mean, they've had 2 waves of buying this club, haven't they? They bought massively before the start of the season. They've had this splurge now before the window. We could even back Peter Odemwingie here for first goal, but he won't be there. But I mean, it's a fascinating game, isn't it? Because backing QPR at these kind of prices, Al, even money with your firm Bluesquare at the moment, it's just been an absolute coffin bet so far, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's why our guys are prepared to lay an even bet for QPR to win this game. Now, Norwich are no great shakes either. They may have rested players against Luton of our division last week, who had a fantastic win in the FA Cup there, but there was over 100 Premier League starts within that starting 11. So you weren't talking about a rested Norwich squad going into the reserve and youth team. You were talking about their fringe players to get into their Premier League squad. And okay, I really do think that if you think that QPR can improve overnight due to the activity in the transfer window, then you have to take us on at evens there. And I'm not saying that we've completely got it right, but I couldn't really bet at those prices, I don't think. I think people will be encouraged by the draw because QPR have been going ahead in their games, then inviting pressure on. I think that's the way Redknapp likes to play, likes to get teams early, and they've been taking leads in games. They did it against Fulham, where Fulham nearly came back to snatch a draw. So overall, I think I'd probably bet the draw if you gave me a free bet on this one.
Interesting call there from Al. I mean, obviously, Dave, whenever we look at these Premier League games, you've got 4 options. You back the home team, the away team, the draw, or you stay out of it. I'm one of these people who hates to stay out of it. Can you make a case here for Norwich at around about 11-4 to win this one? I mean, QPR at the moment, they just don't do the business, but the temptation is to follow them in, isn't it, I suppose, this money?
Well, there's no doubt about it that if QPR to avoid relegation, they have to win a game against Norwich at home. They're 4 points still off second bottom place, and they desperately need 3 points from a game like this. Norwich, the desperation for the points isn't quite as as severe as it is in QPR's case for this particular
They'd be
game.
happy with a draw, wouldn't they?
I think Norwich would be happy
that takes
with a
them
draw.
to 28 points, and that's 11 ahead of QPR.
Yeah, we spoke before the break how potentially a team like Norwich or West Ham could fall back into the relegation mire. You know, and if Norwich did get a point away at Loftus Road, it would be not too bad. I mean, if you were a Leeds United fan, you'd think, what have I done to Norwich to deserve them taking all my players? They've, I think, signed 4 Leeds United players in the last few months, including Luciano Becchio, of course, will probably make his debut in this match. Decent signing, but is he a Premiership quality player? Probably not. QPR, I just don't really like him. I think it's a team of individuals. You know, he's accumulated. You know, he does it every year, Harry Redknapp, and he's accumulated all sorts of big individuals on massive wages. And you know, can they play as a team? I don't think so. Let's
have a quick look at the overs and unders here, boys. Now, I've got a massive view in this, I must admit. I just don't see goals in this game. And I mean, Al, your firm 5 to 6, each of 2.5 goals. I know which way I want to be here. I just don't see goals in the game personally. I think both teams have tightened up recently. Norwich certainly don't give that many goals away, notwithstanding the 5 they chipped at Anfield recently. But is that the way you might see this one, Al? I mean, I can't imagine either side are desperate to go hell for leather in this game.
Yeah, I suppose, mentioning what Dave said, that QPR do eventually have to go for it. This is definitely a must-win game for them. Now, that will obviously make Norwich play a slightly different way. They've only scored 11 goals away from home, so they've not really been contributing to the overs when they've been away from home. And again, I think they'd settle for a draw. I think if you're betting over, you really need a QPR goal within the first 25 minutes of the game. I mean, if you don't get one of those, then Norwich won't make much effort to be at the other end. So it's very much going to be decided for you very early on this game.
I think that's a good call.
What they've done, QPR, is they've had lots of draws since Redknapp has taken over.
2 0-0s and a 1-1 in the last 3 as well, to be fair. So
lots of 0-0s. In fact, Harry Redknapp, I think, has got the most 0-0 draws out of any Premiership League manager since Premiership football began. The only trouble with, and it's clear that, you know, through buying Samba, etc., that he thinks that the best form of attack is defence, and he wants to build from the back. You know, it's an interesting philosophy, but I think they need more than just 0-0 draws these days. They need to go for wins. Yeah. The only trouble with your view on this particular match, and I actually completely agree with it, that it's an under 2.5. It just looks so obvious, doesn't it?
That's right.
It looks so obvious, and always the most obvious bets are usually the ones that cost
Listen,
you.
we'll stick with the obvious bet on this occasion. I don't care what you say there, David. Listen, your team now, boys, playing against Stoke. Very easy formula with Stoke for most punters, and I think most punters do follow this. Back them at the Britannia. You pretty much lay them when they're away. You're going 7-1 here, Al. I can see why. But are Arsenal to be trusted at 4-9, Dave, in this game?
Arsenal are the Graham Hick of Premiership football. They are flat track bullies. Remember, he used to get hundreds against all the rubbish teams. They score goals galore against the likes of West Ham, Newcastle, Norwich, teams like that. Come up against the big team of Chelsea, Man City, Man United, and they lose. Stoke, I would put in the category of the former teams that I've just mentioned. And for me, I think they're certainties in this particular match. 4-9, despite their defensive frailties. They've got enough going forward to justify the big odds on.
I tend to agree with that, Al. I don't think Stoke usually show up when they come to London, although Pulis at the moment, he makes signings as well in these January transfer windows. But I mean, he's not a guy to be underestimated, and they are Premier League stalwarts now, aren't they, at the end of the day, Stoke?
I can't really throw up an alternative view to what you've both said, and you know, as I keep saying, I'm ultra critical of this particular Arsenal team. One thing I would say, let's look at it from a punting point of view. Punting is essentially a purchase, isn't it? Now, if I said to you, right, you're going into a shop, but you're parting with £100, you're going to say you want a shirt, but they're going to put it in a bag before you see it, and you won't get it till you take it home. That is back in Arsenal. Okay. You do not know what you're going to get for your actual bet. Now, whereas 4-9 looks a feasible price for this game, and when you tuning into Jeff Stelling and they're 5-0 up, or tuning into here on Sports Tonight where they're 5-0 up, and you say 4-9 was a great bet. You will have those conversations with yourself about Arsenal all season. It doesn't mean that you need to part with money before this game kicks off.
There's quite a few odds-on shots on the coupon this week, and a few of them I think are worth taking on. Personally, I wouldn't take on Arsenal at 4-9 in this particular match.
Fair point. Punters everywhere checking their Marks and Spencer shirt now on the back of what Alan just said there, though. Everton obviously hosting Aston Villa. It looks obvious again, doesn't it? A 4-11, painfully short. Everton again, draw specialists though, guys. And Villa, you know, last time they were in Merseyside, let's not forget, they absolutely battered Liverpool with one of the strangest results of the entire season so far. But Villa he looks a haunted man, doesn't he, Paul Lambert at the moment, Al? I mean, can you make some sort of case for them 8-1? There's still some pace in the team, but they're just so low on confidence, don't they?
Yeah, and confidence is a huge factor. You speak to any manager. I mean, I get to speak to a lot of managers in our division, and they always tell me it's mainly to do in the player's head. They can do so much, but it's mainly to do within the players' heads, and Villa's heads are not right at the moment. Now, if you're watching this now and you can dig out any of the articles from when Paul Lambert's side went to win at Anfield, you'll see the ridiculous way that journalism in this country works, because every single report said how fantastic a Villa, what a fantastic young side. Paul Lambert is an absolute genius. He's put together a young team. They had low on confidence at the start of the season. They've gone to win at Anfield, watched them fly. Well, they didn't fly at all, did they? Because, you know, they've gone and had probably the worst 2 months any Premier League team's ever had, you know, in terms of their cup performances as well. So, but you can make a case for them on isolated results to say 8-1 is a very good bet. You won't ever want to be on Everton at short prices odds on. They just don't win enough games.
Well, I think that's a good shout, Dave, as well. And let's not forget about Everton. They haven't won by more than 1 goal since the 29th of September. They tend to just squeak by. It was 3-1 win that day against Sunderland. I mean, Dave, 4-11. It looks obvious, but would you stick it in a coupon?
No. I mean, I just mentioned before how there's lots of odds on shots on the coupon this week. And, you know, Arsenal at 4-9, that'll look a much better bet than Everton at 4-11 against Villa. I'll tell you why also I would give a strong case for Villa in this particular match, and that is the last couple of decent results that they've had in the Premier League have been away from home. They beat West Brom. They didn't beat them, but they were leading, but they, I think, ended up drawing 2-2. And you mentioned the Liverpool game as well. It's at home where their fans get them under pressure and they're sort of, you know, booing and they're getting all frustrated at the quality, etc. That's where they don't perform that well. But 8-1 away from home in a game like this, I think they've got every chance. You know, Benteke, I'm getting more and more impressed with. He does need some help, obviously. Apart, he can't do it all himself. But you know, I do think that they've got half a squeak in this match. Yeah.
We had in Channing's Law from last season, where he just said, you know, if you take out the top 4 in the Premier League and see any game, you really have to consider the outsider in every game. And Everton are probably creeping into that top 4 territory where you consider them one of the bigger teams. But I think he'll be playing at 8-1.
So the boys are looking at a bit of value there at Goodison Park. Newcastle versus Chelsea now, guys, and it doesn't get any easier for Rafa Benitez, does it? It just doesn't seem to be quite happening for him at the moment. You're getting around about even money Chelsea. I know, and I'm sure we all do, we're very experienced in the betting industry, the 3 of us. There'll be plenty of money for Chelsea come kick-off here. The last 25 minutes will definitely be for them, expecting them to do the business. But it's certainly no gimme, is it, Al, against a team like Newcastle, who, I agree, they will fight their way out of any trouble at the moment. They've got too much quality, too much size in this team, haven't they?
Yeah, and they haven't been winning their home games. I mean, you look at a form line through Reading over the last few weeks. Reading went 1-0 down at St James's Park. They came back to win 2-1, a pretty much unthinkable result if you looked at Newcastle's form over the last season. But then, you know, Chelsea were leading at Reading in midweek and have come back to, Reading have come back to draw 2-2. So before that game, everyone was saying that Chelsea's away form under Benitez had been very, very good, and making the point you said about Villa playing away from home under pressure. He gets absolute pelters at home, Benitez, so he would much rather play away. I can't see much value in backing Chelsea here. In the same respect, Newcastle, when will they start winning their home games? Probably not one of these difficult ones. The draw, again, looks a very, very good bet at 5-2.
Quick one from you here, Dave. I mean, last time I backed against Chelsea when they were away, I had a big bet on Stoke, and that went horribly wrong for me, of course. Is this the sort of game where they could do something similar, or would you subscribe that maybe the draw... I'm with Al, by the way. I think the draw's a good play in this game.
I think this is one of the bets of the week, actually. I mean, one team we've been... we talk about QPR doing all the business in the January transfer window, but the team we've done probably more than anyone are Newcastle, and he's bought 5 French players. He now is known as Alain Depardieu up there in Newcastle. And I think that, you know, he's strengthened certainly the defence as far as that's concerned, and got a good week. They had a good win in midweek. Chelsea will be, you know, so demoralised at not picking up 3 points having led Reading 2-0 with only 5 minutes to go. And their heads are all over the place, Chelsea, aren't they? 3-2 on Newcastle is the stand-up bet of the weekend for me.
A big caller from David. I'm with the draw here, same as Alan. Reading and Sunderland, the aforementioned Reading, obviously they'll be hugely buoyed, won't they, by that fantastic fight back. And they've been doing this regularly now, and they're showing enough spirit at the moment, Al. I mean, both my firm and yours here, 7-5. I mean, are they an obvious play in this kind of game, though? I mean, they're not really the sort of team I want to back when they're the favourite, though.
No, exactly what I was just about to say, Russ. I don't ever want to be on Reading as favourites. I wouldn't ever want to be taking anything less than about 7-4 about them in any Premier League game. And this is a case in point against the Sunderland team that, although you don't really know what you're going to get from them, they will definitely put up a fight there. So Reading will have to work to get your bet home at 7-5, and I don't really want to trust them to do that. They're favourites for relegation. They're favourites to come bottom of the table. I would always play the outsider of 3 in this particular instance if you were going to have a bet. And Sunderland have certainly got players of quality to go and win at Reading, and it's not a result you'd be surprised reading about on Sunday.
Let's have a look at the overs and unders here. Dave, obviously Sunderland just signing Danny Graham, spending a few quid. Big club as well, actually, but nothing obvious for me here because I think it's the right call around about the even money mark, both of these picks. But how would you play this in terms of goals? How do you see this being traded in terms of where the game develops goals-wise?
I seem to remember reading one of the stats given to me before this programme by your fabulous producer, Josh, and he... In that stat, it suggested that Reading have been involved in some of the more high-scoring games of the year, and actually one of the games where I was quite happy to be at this season was Reading Arsenal when we won 5-2, which was one of the only decent performances of the year. But that aside, generally they look like they can score goals going forward, but boy are they shaky at the back. I mean, they actually make Arsenal's defence look quite secure. So I do think it's a decent bet. The overs, I think, are a decent bet here. It's going to be quite an open game. Might end up sort of 2-2 or 3-2 to either team. I think it's a decent price as well if you look at some of the correct score fixed odds prices for those type of score lines. Danny Graham will be out to impress. I see goals, yeah. So what are the overs here? Evens, that type of price, decent bet.
Interesting stuff, boys. Well, we'll leave it there for part 2. Join us in part 3. We'll look ahead at the rest of the weekend games, including Sunday's action. And welcome back to part 3 of the Punter. We'll continue our look now ahead at the weekend action. It's, of course, West Ham versus Swansea, boys. We've got Alan Alger here from Bluesquare and David Garbacz, a renowned famous odds compiler from the old days of the game, looking ahead at the weekend action. West Ham, Swansea, boys. I mean, Swansea, I can assure you now, the money I've done in on this team, you could have bought a nice townhouse in Kensington this year. It's really been a disaster for me from the word go. Can't call this team right. You boys have already pinpointed West Ham as potential relegation candidates, but 5-4, they're still a favourites against the Swansea team who just continue to surprise, don't they?
They do. One thing I will say about Swansea is they've only lost 6 times this season. Now, you were obviously on when they sneaked a few draws and were hoping they'd get an extra goal or two. So they're not getting beaten by teams, and West Ham are going to have a pretty good performance here to be able to beat Swansea, because not many teams do. I've seen both of these teams in the last few weeks. Swansea in an FA Cup tie, Arsenal, and West Ham in the league game at Arsenal. Yeah. Swansea, both sides were actually resting players. But one thing you would say about Swansea is that their defence, they tend to encourage a lot of chances from the away team. There were some stats after that game. Arsenal had about 25 shots on target and only scored 1 goal. They were added up in the paper the next day, and it went back over the last 3 Swansea games before that. I think it added up to nearly 100 chances, and they'd only conceded 4 goals. So their keeper deserves a hell of a lot of credit for that. But they are hard to beat, and I would not be wanting to back a West Ham team with a porous defence at 5-4.
Fair enough. Dave, your thoughts quickly on this one?
The only thing in West Ham's favour in this particular one is that Swansea have had an awful lot of football lately. Been involved in the Carling Cup, the FA Cup, game midweek, and all sorts of things.
And they're safe. And
they're pretty safe, so the pressure's off from that point of view. I don't think that West Ham are in great shapes. We've mentioned that earlier on. And the way Swansea have been playing their football, you know, they can play really quite freely. And I think against the West Ham team, we like to really sort of get in amongst the opposition and play tight. All of a sudden, Swansea, if they do their little triangle passes and get it around them, they might find some great space in and around the West Ham defence. So I'd be wanting to lay West Ham here. I can't believe they're favourites for this match. It's each of 2 at least.
Fair enough. I think that's a fair call. Yeah. Wigan, Southampton. Let's go to the bottom of the table because both of these sides struggling. And let's not forget about Southampton. No team has thrown away more points from a winning position than Southampton. They've got a real problem here now, and obviously with the new stewardship now that Nigel Adkins has gone. Wigan for me are a bet here, boys, but I mean you might have a completely different view. I think Wigan always tend to come good later on the season. I think they actually pinpoint games better than most. They're very, very experienced. Al, quick thoughts on this one, but for me it's a Wigan home win.
Well, I probably would say this, but I think Wigan were extremely fortunate against our side, Macclesfield, in the FA Cup last week. Watching the highlights, Macclesfield had an absolute stonewall penalty. So, you know, Macclesfield are about 8th or 9th in our division at the moment. So, Wigan, they weren't full strength Wigan team, but certainly half strength Wigan team have struggled there. Southampton have got this new lease of life about them. Yeah, it was a difficult fixture in midweek. They've led at Old Trafford for a matter of 10 minutes. So, you know, if you take the positives out of that game, you can probably focus on the first 15 minutes. I would be all over backing Southampton and going against you here. I would be backing Southampton at Sporting Bet's 5-2, and I'd be very happy with that bet.
Al's putting me off this Wigan. And of course, Wigan rely on De Santo. No home goal since going back a long way now.
No.
So
I think this is going to be an open game as well. A draw really doesn't help either team, does it? You know, it's no good for anyone. Southampton are going to look at Pochettino. What's his name? Pochettino, the manager. He came out specifically before the game at Old Trafford in midweek and said, "We are going for the win here. You know, we're going to go all out. We're not going to just sit back and hope to sort of damage limitation or anything like that." I do love that particular philosophy, that attitude, and he's going to take that attitude, I think, into nearly all the games that they're going to be playing from now to the end of the season and trying to keep them up. And Wigan is a game where they can get something out of. So I'm afraid, Russ, I'm going to have to go with Alan here.
That's not good fun for me.
And oppose you.
Quick peek at the overs and unders here, guys. Again, I wouldn't have a massive view on this, other than I've already committed myself that Wigan will score more than the away team in this game. But I mean, 8 to 11 the overs, is that the way to play? I mean, Southampton, they do play this quite attractive. Brent,
yeah, I think there'll be goals in the game. Wigan drew 2-2 midweek, and I don't think they've had a single nil. I think apart from Man United, they're the only team, or they've had the least nil-nil draws in the Premiership over the course of this season. So they tend to score a few goals themselves. Open game, as I said, draw won't suit either team. There's going to be some goals in the game. 8 to 11 is okay.
Let's move over to Fulham versus Man United, because this is a key fixture. Every time United play, and we see the turnover of the United games. I mean, punters can't resist backing them. This is a fixture actually where they've had trouble in recent seasons, haven't they? It's not an obvious one, but you put up a price like 8 to 13, like Bluesquare have here, Al, and you're going to see money for United. It's as simple as that, isn't it?
We will. There's absolutely no doubt whatsoever that we will see a shed load of money for them, and especially because it's a live game and it's in that Saturday 5:30 fixture. And that Saturday 5:30 fixture, as bookmakers,
the twilight zone, we call it, I think.
Yeah, it can make or break your weekend. Because put it this way, if the results have been bad for punters during the day, they will chase on Manchester United. If the results have been good for punters during the day, they will press up on Manchester United. We will lay Manchester United. Either way, whatever the results are that day, we will lay them. I think you have to be happy to take them on historically in this fixture. I don't trust Fulham as much as our compilers do here, because you know they've beaten a West Ham team in midweek that we've already said are no great shakes. They've beaten them at home. They can turn in the odd good performance, especially in London derbies, as we've seen over the last few years. I would be all over chasing up on that 8 to 13 and being in with the punters.
Dave, quick word for you on this one. I mean, we come from a history together here where you always take on Man United, but normally this is the kind of game.
That's why I haven't got a penny left in the bank.
But this is the kind of game where you take on Fulham when they're away. You're with them at home. This could be tricky for United. It's no gimme. I know which way you're going to be.
If anybody watched last week the game on ITV, Man United v Fulham in the Cup, probably one of the most boring games I think I've ever seen in my life. And yet here they are again, Fulham against Man United live on TV in the 5:30 fixture. But you're right, this is going to be far more interesting because there's going to be a little bit more atmosphere about the place. Fulham's this lovely compact ground where you do get a decent atmosphere, and you know Berbatov's going to be really up for it against his former team. Manchester United, your odds compiler will be receiving a large pat on the back and a little bit of a bonus come Sunday morning, because I think he'll have made your firm a fair few quid. Okay. I'd take on United in this game.
I like that call as well from David, and I think we're probably unanimous here. You've got no choice but to be with Fulham just from a value perspective. West Brom v Spurs, boys. Obviously West Brom full of controversy at the moment. I mean, you have to feel for them. They didn't look as though they did an enormous amount wrong. with Peter Odemwingie, but they've lost that player, it looks like, for the time being. Again, I tend to feel that even though Spurs are slipping slightly at the moment, you'll see money out at around about 11 to 10. I think both our firms will here. I just think people think Spurs are a fashionable team, and they have shown enough, and they were very good against United for big periods at White Hart Lane recently, weren't they?
Yeah, but they followed that up with a defeat in the FA Cup at Leeds, and then a game where they should have won and should have been back to their best at Norwich, where they've scraped a draw at the end due to a wonder goal. So they haven't played very well there. I don't think Villas-Boas knows his best team. I don't think he picks it regularly enough. I think he tinkers around with the side too much. And I speak to Tottenham fans, unfortunately, and they say they're not impressed overall with the way that this team's shaping up. Yeah, it has a lot of good things to look forward to for the future, but there's a lot of things where they're very uncertain about the future. 11 to 10 odds against a team like West Bromwich Albion, who at the start of the season you would be backing at these prices. If they're back to anywhere near the best the way they are at the start of the season, Odemwingie, they've given him 2 weeks off. I think Dan Petrescu should make that more of a part of his team talk and say, I tell you what, you really do need to put him right on this, and I would back them as the outsiders here at home.
Dave, what are your thoughts quickly on this one? I mean, Spurs, it's difficult to back a team without a lot of attacking players in it, and Spurs are lacking that at the moment.
It is, although Alan and I have agreed on most things so far today. In this particular instance, I think I'm going to disagree with you. I actually think that Spurs are a decent bet at 11 to 10. I believe that the Odemwingie factor will have a negative thing. You're right that as a manager and as a coach, they should be making a positive out of it.
I said Dan Petrescu. I meant Steve Clarke, obviously. I don't know why I said that.
I thought it was a new advisor.
Yeah. I don't know why I said that. Yeah.
Spurs have got a lot of quality. This Bale is just different class, and just
one of the best.
And also they've signed a really good German midfielder, Lewis Holtby, who was supposed to have come to Arsenal, ended up going to Spurs. So it's going to make it doubly painful when he turns out to be some superstar. And I think he's a really decent player from what I've seen of him. Spurs. I'd be with Spurs in this match, unfortunately.
Okay, you play Spurs 11 to 10. Dave, give me your thoughts here. City, Liverpool. I mean, a big fixture, this one. Obviously, I mean, City, it's a relentless charge. They need to keep up, but they didn't do the business against QPR. The 7-point gap is back there. Liverpool, Brendan Rodgers, they can't afford to slip up at all. You're getting 3 to 1, 100 to 30 with Bluesquare here against Liverpool doing the business. 5 to 6. Again, you tend to think most people steam in on City, but Liverpool aren't bad in these big games. They can actually draw something out, can't they, sometimes?
They are. You never really know what you're going to get with Liverpool. They're very similar to Arsenal this season. One week they can be absolutely brilliant, the next week they can be absolutely awful. And the result last week against Oldham just didn't bear thinking about from a Liverpool perspective. City, very disappointing 0-0 draw against QPR in midweek. And you're right, 7 points behind United in the league. They literally cannot afford anything but 3 points, especially in their home fixtures where they've been so tremendously consistent over the course of the last 2 seasons. Although, I keep mentioning Arsenal, but although they only got this 2-2 draw against them in midweek, overall I was not overly impressed with Liverpool. I think they showed quite a lot of gaps in midfield and in defence. And if you're playing Carragher and Wisdom against people like Aguero and Tevez, then I do think that actually Man City are not a bad price there at 5 to 6. It's not like they're big odds on 2s on or 4 to 7 or something like that. And no, I think they're probably worth a tickle. Liverpool will look at other fixtures as the season goes on, where they're going to be picking up points in the race for 4th or Europa League status.
Quick for you from you, Alan, on the overs and unders as well, before we head to the break. But yeah, I mean, overs fancy, but City are pretty powerful at home.
They're powerful at home, but they have got a defence that will concede goals to good players, and Liverpool have got good players in forward positions. They'll also score themselves, City, but one thing overall you've got to say about this game is Liverpool are the bookmakers' friends. In the big games, they perform well, like you said, and they make sure that any big team punted, like Manchester United and Arsenal, a case in point in midweek, have to work for the points and usually produce either a draw or a Liverpool win to make sure that the bookmakers win. And then when they're at home against a small team, when they're odds on and in all the accumulators, they suddenly fail and draw. So they've been good friends to us over the last six or 7 years. But in this particular game, City will have to work for the win. I would probably back Liverpool and over goals at 3 to 5 there.
Okay, interesting views there from the boys. That's part 3 rounded up. We've looked at all the football. After the break, part 4, we're going to diverse things slightly. It's the Super Bowl and, of course, Six Nations Rugby. And welcome back to the final part of this week's Punter. We're going to look now ahead at the beginning of the Six Nations, and just after that it is, of course, Super Bowl Sunday. But boys, let's get straight into the action here, because rugby union generally a great sport to punt on, very difficult from an odds compiling point of view because of the various intangibles. But quick look at the outright here with Bluesquare. England slight favourites, 15-08, 2-1 France, 7-2 Ireland. The tip of a lot of pundits today, 5-1 Wales. On the back of a wooden spoon. They've been backed actually for the wooden spoon today with sportingbet. But quick thoughts on that. At the moment, I think it's quite hard to really form a big opinion.
Yeah, I think we see the England-France clash as key. The fact that takes place at Twickenham, and the fact that England host France has edged them into favouritism here at 15-8. 2-1. Ireland have been backed, as you say. Wales have been backed for the goal for the wooden spoon.
That's right.
33-1. They've got a few players back since, but they've been backed into 12-1. I think with those players back, they should be able to, stave off becoming bottom of the 6 teams. And obviously Italy, they're always going to be odds on for that.
Dave, we're going to go straight into one of the handicaps here and get your views on that as well, and get an idea as to where you think the value lies. Obviously, there's no handicap in this game. It's such a tight one. 5-6 Wales, 6-5 Ireland. General thoughts on rugby union punting and a view on this game, maybe?
General thoughts on rugby union punting is that I've done my absolute brains on it over the years, because I know pretty much not a great deal about rugby as I do maybe about other sports, but that doesn't stop me having a nice interest in nearly every Six Nations game there's ever been. Now this is actually the most competitive game of the 3 for this particular opening weekend, and it's a bit of a cracker in Wales against Ireland. I think actually that Wales, a lot of people, as you say, have been backing them for the wooden spoon. No team have won back-to-back Grand Slams since I think 1998 or something like that. So Wales are not at all fancy to do as well as they did last year. Of course, they're the champions. Saying that, I think I think they're being written off a little bit too quickly here. And at home to Ireland, I think the prices actually do represent a decent, what are we there, 5-6 Wales, I think represents a pretty good bet. This could be a tight game, and it will all come down to the kicking boot of Lee Halfpenny, and I think he's going to do the business for the boys.
Let's get some brief views as well on the England-Scotland game. The handicap clearly in play here, a 15-point line. I mean, I always tend to find, boys, that the punters again tend to back England, although I think the sharper money on this occasion would probably be for Scotland. But the last time we saw England at Twickenham, they were beating the All Blacks by a merry score. How do you see this go? I think it's more about trend this, Al. Where would you see money going here, and how the game might develop?
I think, well, England will be backed, but I would always like to take on, and I hate to relate it back to football, but obviously football's where my knowledge base is. But I would always like to be more than 2 tries away if you were in the handicap. And at 15, I probably would take Scotland here with 15. Because the 2 try margin with the conversions, they'd still be within the point spread, and teams don't extend themselves, especially in the first weeks of this tournament.
I don't know if you remember last year's game, the Calcutta Cup, Scotland-England. Scotland should have won that.
Fight for every single point. Fight for every single point.
Scotland won't win any championships this year, but if there's going to be a game, they're going to be absolutely fighting, giving every ounce of energy. It's going to be this one.
They'll keep it a hell of a lot closer than the market.
15's a lot of points.
And then finally, my favourite rugby union team, Italy, because they kick penalties all the time, versus France. 12-point line here, Dave. I mean, you've got to take Italy plus 12, and as punter, surely
you do. As I said before, rugby, I've done my absolutes on over the years. But if there's one team who have been incredibly kind to me and just to punters as a whole, I think it's been Italy. They're constantly being underrated by the layers. And this is another a great example, really. I mean, Italy at home, getting 12 points against a French team who we know from year in, year out, are always slow starters. I mean, they'll start getting into their stride, games 3 and 4, and when they need to play, the Englands and the Wales. But away to Italy, and they've had problems with the Italians in the past, and I genuinely, France will probably end up winning the game, but 12 points That's massive, yeah.
I'm sure we'll look at rugby union a little bit more in the future, but let's not forget the tie in some of these games. 12 points in that one is certainly a runner. Finally, we'll round off the punter this week with a look at Super Bowl Sunday, boys. Over to New Orleans. It's Baltimore versus San Francisco, two teams that I've got not a shilling on. I did my money in the playoff rounds, I'm afraid. Seattle, Green Bay, and also Atlanta. So that's where my money went. But a great game, Dave, obviously. A great punting event. So many specials. I'm sure your firm, Alan, Bluesquare, will have plenty up there for us to get stuck into. But a 2-on favourite here, San Francisco, 6-4 Baltimore. Any views, Dave? I mean, it's been an amazing season, as it always is, NFL, from a punting point of view.
It's been an amazing season. Of course, this Super Bowl has got amazing stories. You've got the coaches of the two respective teams are brothers. You know, it's just unbelievable in a sport as so multi, watched by so many millions across the world. Baltimore, how on earth have they made the Super Bowl? I mean, they've won against Denver when they were about 20-1 to do so, and they scored that last second touchdown on like a Hail Mary pass. They won in the conference final against New England when every man and his dog were on New England, and Tom Brady to sort of make it into the Super Bowl for the pin-up boy of the sport. And all of a sudden here they are. They find themselves in the big game itself. And for me, this is where their run does end. I think 2's on San Francisco. They've been brilliant all season under this fantastic young rookie quarterback Kaepernick. And 2's on -3.5. That's the bet. I'm
going to get a very quick view from one of your specials here, Al, as we round off this week's punter. Joe Flacco 11-4 to be the MVP. If Baltimore win it, surely it's going to be Flacco, isn't it? Isn't that the bet, surely, on this occasion?
Yeah, I would say that you're probably better if you fancied Ravens. You're better off backing him for MVP than actually backing them to win outright at 7-5, because he's more often than not going to be the MVP in any of their victories.
Well, listen, everybody, thanks for your time today, Al. Thanks for your time as well, David. That's it for this weekend's punter. Fantastic action to look forward to over the weekend. Make sure you stay up for Super Bowl Sunday. But like I say, we've had some great views today from the boys, and we'll see you very soon here again on The Punter.